How do you see this fight playing out on Saturday? How do you win the fight?
I see myself knock him out in the first round. I don't think that the fight will go to the distance. I will finish him before that.
Be careful that he doesn't punch himself out. Oh! Massive knockdown for Topuria! And still, he does it again!
Whatever. The only thing I know for sure is that I'm going to knock him out in the first round.
But there's a difference already in how Charles is absorbing these shots. Well, he's already busted up. Oh! Out cold.
A man of his word!
Oh my goodness.
And now
He called
the new
it. He
UFC
called it.
lightweight champion, Ilia
He called it. He said he was going to knock him out in the first round, and he did it.
Ilia Topuria has just done the impossible again. First, Ilia goes out there and becomes the featherweight champion of the world by dethroning the king, and at the time, arguably, probably the GOAT at that division. And then he goes and follows that knockout up with a knockout over another guy who was very much in the GOAT conversation for this division, Max Holloway, who at that point in time had never been knocked down, let alone knocked out. And then, of course, that brings us to last night, where he followed up that insane performance with, yes, yet again, an even crazier performance by knocking out Charles Oliveira in the first round, which is something that really no one else in the murderer's row that is 155 pounds has been able to do to Charles. Not Michael Chandler, not Dustin Poirier, not Arman Sarukian, but Ilia Topuria, the featherweight who has got some of the most ridiculous power that you're ever going to see in the UFC. Over the years, we've seen countless situations where a new, young, hungry guy comes to the UFC with all the pressure in the world on his shoulders because he's being touted either by himself or the promotion or both that he is the next big thing. But when it comes to Ilia Topuria, not only has that holded true completely and totally, but I think that most fans don't fully understand how crazy what Ilia just did really is. Now, the easy, obvious comparison that everyone's made throughout this entire build up to Ilia eventually becoming the champion and now a two-division champion was, of course, the notorious Conor McGregor. Both of these guys coming up from 145 pounds, eventually fighting for and dominating en route to winning a second belt at 155 pounds. Guys with knockout power. There are a lot of comparisons to be made. And usually for most fighters, when you compare them to Conor McGregor in terms of their ability to excite fans, their ability to put on mind-blowing performances, usually that's a compliment, but in the case of Ilia Topuria, that actually might be a bit of an insult. Both of these guys built up their name by being fun to watch knockout artists and by winning a belt at 145, dethroning an all-time great champion. But in the case of Conor McGregor, there was always a little bit of criticism because he slept Aldo with really the first punch that he threw, leaving a lot of people to speculate that if that fight were to happen again, if there was a rematch, Jose Aldo, being the diverse striker that he is, could have very well had a chance of doing some real damage and potentially winning in a rematch with Conor at that time. Conor, of course, opting to not defend his belt at 145, instead pursuing the now all-time classic rivalry between him and Nate Diaz. Ilia, on the other hand, had to walk through some fire in order to get in close enough to Volk to eventually land that knockout punch, proving that it was in no way, shape, or form a fluke. He called that he would knock him out. He withstood the striking, the footwork, and the diversity of attacks from Volkanovski, again, an all-time legend, and was able to push him up against the cage and land that perfect shot that he said he would. Not only that, but Ilia, unlike Conor, went on to defend that belt, and not just defend it against anyone, but against Max Holloway. And Ilia, again, being this insane all-time fighter that he is, he doesn't just go in there to win. He goes in there to make history, making it very well known that he was there for one reason and one reason only, and that's to become the first guy to knock down and knock out Max Holloway. As crazy as it sounded at the time, he was able to make it happen. And then that brings us to Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. And when you compare Oliveira to Eddie Alvarez, both of these guys are great fighters. Both of these guys were champions. But Charles Oliveira's title run is one of the greatest to ever happen in that division. Charles being one of the most proficient submission artists in the entire UFC, going out there and knocking out guys like Michael Chandler, like Justin Gaethje, before submitting Gaethje. And again, here comes Ilia, making it very well known that he was going to knock him out in the first round, and as unbelievable as it sounds, he did exactly that. Conor, again, having one of the all-time performances, striking on the feet against Eddie Alvarez, but I think there's a clear distinction between those two performances, the obvious one being that that Conor won in the second round and Ilia knocked out Charles in the first round. But to quote my guy Jeremy Stevens, Conor, for as much of a power puncher as he is, he was TKOing guys, and when Ilia hits them,
They don't fucking move.
and I'm not bringing up all of this just to disgrace Conor McGregor's legacy. He's doing that just fine on his own. I am bringing it up to make mention of the fact that what Ilia is doing, Ilia hasn't just fulfilled the role of the new superstar that the UFC desperately needs, the guy that can fill McGregor's shoes. Ilia has effectively replaced Conor as that standard, simply because what he has done up to this point is simply better. Ilia never lost on the regional circuit. Ilia up to this point has never denied a challenge and was more than willing to defend his belt as most people think a champion should. And look, there will never be someone who was able to grow the sport the same way that a Conor McGregor was able to, or even a Chuck Liddell or an Anderson Silva. And that's because the sport at this point in time already is huge. And at the end of the day, Ilia is kind of just standing on the shoulders of giants. He was able to see what all of these other guys did wrong and did right, and was able to make the correct decisions. He was able to put himself in a situation where he has a well-rounded game, where he can grapple and he can strike. But I don't think the difference between Ilia and Conor starts and stops with the fact that he's had amazing performances. I think Ilia, with his unblemished record in the cage, he also mirrors that with his record outside of the cage. Up to this point, there have been zero negative headlines about who Ilia is in his personal life. The guy at just 28 years old, holding now not one but two belts, is also by all accounts the ultimate family man. And even though things get a little heated when it comes to all the trash talk, he has been very respectful to all of his opponents, past, present, and potentially future. And I think when you put it all together, not just who he's beat, but the way that he's beat them, I think there's a very strong argument that Ilia Topuria right now is the greatest fighter that planet Earth has to offer, pound for pound. Let me know in the comments below, what did you guys think about Ilia's performance, and what do you think's next for the guy? I think no matter who he fights next, it's going to be a must watch. And honestly, he's one of the rare situations where he's accomplished so much at a young age. I would definitely not rule out an early retirement. No matter how badly I want to see him fight, hell, on every pay-per-view. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.